Welcome to the MOSSAD Files podcast. I'm Dan Raviv, the co-author of books including Spies Against Armageddon, Every Spy a Prince, and other books that take a look at Israel's security and intelligence agencies. And of course, since October 7th of 2023, there is a war. But as Israelis say, it's a seven-front war. It has grown. It has included the Houthis in Yemen and the West Bank, and of course Hezbollah in Lebanon and Iran. And no one has watched this any more keenly than our guest in this episode, Or Yissachar. First, say hello, and then I will tell the audience who you are, Or. Say hi.
Hello, Dan. Very good to be with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Or Yissachar is the Vice President for Research and Content at Israel's Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. It's known in Hebrew and to Israelis as the Bitronistim, often quoted. You are, and of course, senior people in your organization. In general, or tell me, in general, retired generals and very senior people in the IDF. I would say that's the core of IDSF. Is that true?
That's true. That's the founding core, let's say the founding fathers, if you will, of IDSF. These are retired and reserve. We have younger generals than most organizations in their 40s, 50s who do active reserve for hundreds of days in this war. And not just the IDF, also the Shin Bet, Mossad, police. And that's really the core, the leading core of the organization. And on top of that, we got 40,000 Israelis who chose to register. I encourage everyone to do so. Got thousands of followers from North America too. So in the U.S., that's so humbling.
You know, Or Yissachar, I was reading some of your organization's material in English, and I was struck. I might not get this exactly right, but you'll correct me. That what you have in mind is thinking about Israel's strategy for survival and success and safety and security, of course,
Mm.
but not just in the next 5 days, 5 weeks, 5 months. Were you speaking about 5 generations, or?
Yeah, I would say so. Israel is infamous for not really having a national security strategy. It's all like you say in Judaism, a wisdom that goes by heart, from mouth to ear, generation to generation. And the danger is that in some point, if you don't get it properly streamlined and with a tough backbone of research and content, and all of these wonderful ideas could get sort of lost in translation. And so our job here is to first make sure that Israel has a great next generation of young people who would listen to our lectures, and we'll walk them through, their service in the military and active duty and afterwards in adult life, and go to the media, social media, everywhere to decision makers in Israel, in the United States, and really make our case that Israel has to be strong in order to survive for generations. I mean, look at me. I'm not a big general, and still, I'm proud to be working for the organization because it's such a great privilege to speak to the younger generation in particular. Every time I'm having a little bit of a hard stride, I go talk to one of these groups. They're simply fabulous. Got a lot of reasons to be optimistic.
Our audience on the Mossad Files, of course, knows a lot about Israel, and the audience knows that there are a lot of divisions over every subject and every issue. And I've said to some Israelis, Bitronistim, they say, "Oh well, that's the hard line. That's the hawks.
Right.
That's the people who believe that Israel needs to go to war."
Right.
Instead of emphasizing peace efforts, tell me how unfair you might think that is. Is it?
Yeah, it's probably unfair, but that's probably all right. Look, I mean, I don't think you can probably call us hawkish rather than dovish. That's better to my ears than right versus left, because all the definitions, I think also in the United States and in Israel too, after October 7, it's kind of a mishmash. What is right wing, what is left wing today? You kind of have different groupings in Israel today. I would say people who are more hawkish and pro, military clear result, and those who are pro appeasement maybe or a diplomatic means first. that's probably all right. Most Israelis, I say, believe in Israel's right to exist as a free Jewish democratic society. And I think the argument is what means you choose to do that. I happen to believe that if you let a threat metastasize as happened in Gaza, what you run across is October 7, and we don't want that to happen. So that solution could sound rough and tough. That's okay. But in our understanding, and we rely on all these hundreds of generals and people from academia and young people, we strongly believe that if Israel does not take responsibility to tackle these challenges on its borders and inside its borders, I think it's a recipe for disaster. That's what we witnessed on October 7, and it was sort of the Yom Kippur War, the surprise attack scenario that we really wanted to avoid.
Well, one decision that seems to be active for weeks now in the Gaza war that's been raging for a year and a half is whether to emphasize freeing all the hostages. 59 remain.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, fewer than half are believed to be alive, but still, the Israeli government, Prime Minister Netanyahu, recent statements by the commanders of the army, of the IDF, say that absolutely freeing all the hostages is one of the priorities, but defeating Hamas so it can never again rule Gaza and threaten Israel is also a top strategic goal. Can they really live with each other? Some people think you got to put the hostages first and later
Mhm.
beat up Hamas, or the other way around.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's exactly, you touched upon the point that I think is the main, I would say, bone of contention in Israeli society today. What do you do first? And I happen to believe that the hostages issue should not be political. We are sometimes referred to as maybe expressing political views. I'd rather treat it as policy, not politics. I honestly believe that all Israelis want to see all hostages home yesterday, a year ago, not tomorrow, and as fast as possible. But it has become a political issue, unfortunately, and I don't want it to become such. It pains me it really shudders me to think about our brothers and sisters over there in the tunnels of Hamas, chained and starved, while the much of the international community is busy, and the humanitarian status of Palestinians in Gaza, they're doing fine. They live in tents, they get humanitarian assistance. Whoever is not doing fine is our hostages who are being tortured every day. That should not be a political line. But, this is really the art of finding fault lines where they aren't. And now the Israeli society, I think, is divided around, as you said, what do you do first? I don't think these two objectives are diametrically opposed. Not at all. I think these are absolutely complementary goals. If we bring back our hostages, Hamas would be, I guess it's obvious to everyone, Hamas would be much more exposed, much like Hezbollah in Lebanon. They know that. That's why they took the hostages in the first place. They understand, and they are cunning, and they are cruel, and they are really worse than animals, but they're no idiots, and they understand that the value of life in Israel is primary and first and foremost. And so this, of course, will tear our society apart, threaten to tear it apart. I think that we should put all pressure possible on Hamas. Long ago, by the way, I think the delay is shocking. To free all the hostages and not to compromise the other goals of the war. I don't think it's diametrically opposed. I think it's definitely achievable, and we don't need to go into tactics right now because everybody's listening, probably the enemy too. But definitely, this is possible. There are many leverages that Israel did not use for the past year, and I think we should definitely do it.
Well, some part of the strategy or tactics is obvious, right? On March 18th, Prime Minister Netanyahu and the leadership decided to attack, to hit Hamas very hard again in Gaza. We all know that means some civilians will be killed. That in the
Right.
world media makes Israel look bad. But just tell me, what does that accomplish as Israel creates more corridors that it controls and cuts off some movement that Hamas fighters obviously were getting used to using again? Do you believe that the military, the Israeli military, pounding Gaza again does hurt Hamas, and to the extent that Hamas might agree to free some hostages?
Full stop. I think that's the only thing that led Hamas to free over 100 hostages in November of 23, and some 100 more in the months after that. I also think that we need to be smart about it, and if there is a plausible deal, accept it and take it. I don't think anyone in Israel, the government included, would oppose that. I think the main bone of contention is what are Israel's, I would say, red lines, and where we cannot, with what terms we cannot live as a society. And I'm reminding you that Hamas did not agree to release all hostages in return for to the end of the war until very recently. And even that, what I'm telling you, is based upon some, random reports in the Arab media that everyone seems to be quoting. So I think we are simply flooded and spoon-fed by gaslighting on steroids. I think that's exactly what Hamas would love us to believe, that these two objectives are diametrically opposed. And you mentioned the civilians in Gaza. Got to tell you, we have no clue. Neither you nor me nor anyone knows exactly how many civilians died in Gaza. There's just a textbook example of gaslighting and sort of selective truth. As I remember those reports in Western media saying the IDF bombed an UNRWA school. Yeah, sure thing. The IDF bombed an UNRWA school. The only detail that they forgot, this sort of forgot or left out, is that this school was vacant, was free. No civilians were there. There were almost 20 Hamas terrorists over there occupying the school again against any international rule. So I think once you portray the picture this way, or sort of say 30 Palestinians were killed rather than wonder about their role in the war, it's a bit like saying instead of 30 Hamas terrorists or like PIJ terrorists and some collateral damage with civilians that we all are sorry for, but instead of describing them as Palestinians, their nationality, I would describe their role as either militants or civilians. It's a bit like saying the United States has killed a Saudi guy in the raid over Bin Laden's home. It just doesn't work.
Now, what did you conclude in your recent trip to the United States? What did you conclude about U.S. support? I'm sure that you picked up indications, conversations with the elites, if you will, in the United States, right, who are in touch with Congress, know about the level of support. You noticed in the media, they don't talk about the Gaza war every day, but whether it's sympathetic or not, and of course, the American college campuses filled with anti-Israeli protests. It became fashionable to be pro-Palestinian, even if that's pro-Hamas. Now, that's a big mouthful, but consider as a strategic thinker, what's the role of the U.S., including public support?
Right, it plays a major role, and I think public support in the United States is a part of Israel's national security. In that public opinion in the United States, like any democracy, directly affects the behavior and making of those at the top. This is, much like the old joke that a congressman from Iowa in some district would, if he had one phone call from the president of the United States and another phone call from the head of the local agriculture association, he would not know which phone to pick first, because that the public really is the basis of the foundation of the reason why you're in your role in the first place. And I think Israel understands that. We haven't quite figured out how to speak American, so to speak, not to speak Hebrew translated into English, but speak American. And I think it's very clear to me, being in the United States, there is great deal of support to Israel. I think anyone in their right mind see Israel, a democratic country, versus Hamas, a rogue terrorist, Al Qaeda-like, ISIS-like mobsters who are. There's no dilemma there. I think what they have question marks on, and that's perfectly legitimate, is the way in which Israel is conducting this war, and is it transparent enough? I happen to believe it is. I happen to believe it's just. There is no such thing as a war free of mistakes or any such thing. But I think we failed miserably in conveying the message, not just for the past year and a half, Dan. I think for the past 70 years, we sort of spoke to ourselves, spoke about, I don't know, cherry tomatoes and the USB sticks and the beaches in Tel Aviv, rather than really relate to our reason for being as a nation. The fact that Moses came to the promised land and sort of led the Israelites into the promised land, the fact that we have been here for the past few millennia, I think that's our core reason for being in the land of Israel. and all the rest is simply sort of showing off your achievements. I also find it a bit strange that Israel is the only country in the world that has to sort of have people around jumping up and down and sort of supporting its right to exist. It's a bit like saying I support Germany's right to exist. I just think that it's we really need to take a serious look into a gaslighting mechanism around the world, all this information sphere, and take with a serious grain of salt any such news that portrays Israel in a negative light. Not saying it's free of criticism, derives of criticism, but I also don't think it's that negative as it is described.
You don't think the atmosphere is that negative? Well, there's evidence, of course, in the current administration. President Biden also felt that he's a Zionist and rushed over to Israel after the October 7th massacres, showed support for Israel, but then later had some criticism for how Israel was conducting itself in Gaza. President Trump is not criticizing Israel, and I thought it was very noteworthy that on Tuesday, he spoke on the phone with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and President Trump wrote, "I've just spoken to the Prime Minister relative to numerous subjects, including trade, that would be the tariffs issue, Iran, where there are nuclear talks between the US and Iran about the nuclear program. The call went very well," President Trump wrote. Here's the key part: "We are on the same side of every issue." I can imagine, or that as an Israeli looking for Israel's strategic good, there's nothing more important than a White House on your side. And with everything going on right now, including talks with Iran, Donald Trump said, "We're on the same side on every issue." You like hearing that?
I love hearing that. Look, I'm sure there's some level of disagreement, but I do think that these things sort of like ironed out in discussions, and I think the Israelis are doing a smart move by sort of taking it to the table and sort of behind closed doors and sort of figuring out what best serves both American and Israeli interests instead of sort of to hammer on that these dimensions of the war. And look, I mean, this is, needless to say, has also become a politicized issue in the United States, both Ukraine, Israel, and sort of even Russian disinformation, and all these things that are sort of are very heavy on the emotional roller coaster that we are being ordered, like given marching orders by all these, algorithms and bots around the sphere to be angry about. And I think Americans are kind of fed up, don't want to be angry anymore, just want to understand. And I think our main role is to mediate to both the Israeli public and the American public and around the world what Israel's main security interests are, how it can best serve the US interests as well in this case. And look, I think Trump is doing a wise move. He understands that being pro-Israeli, or at least being friendly to Israel while insisting on the US national security interests, is perfectly legit. I don't think it's anything extraordinary for an American president to say we don't want any unfair trade practices going around. And Israel kind of understood that. And the first thing that was announced by Israel after that Trump Liberation Day, so to speak, April 2nd, is to say, all right, no more customs, no more tariffs in the United States.
No more
And
duties on US goods. I got that, but that's not the key to the strategy and your seven-sided war
problem.
and survival. It's part of the story to try to make whoever is the leader in the US happy. Got that. So how about the talks with Iran? It felt like when Prime Minister Netanyahu was last at the White House and President Trump told the world that the US was starting to negotiate with Iran, everyone said that's not what Netanyahu would want. That's not what Israel would want. And how about that famous phrase from business negotiations that says, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu? The possibility that a deal could be made that does not take into account Israel's concerns. What could be a good deal that has to do with Iran's nuclear program?
Look, there can be a good deal with Iran. I'm just highly skeptical it's ever going to happen. Look, I mean, you mentioned these sort of metaphors from the business world. I would say I worked several years for the high-tech sector in Israel, like a good Israeli, as a team lead, and a web analyst. And always told me, I mean, if you don't ask, the answer is no. Basically, if you don't ask for a raise this year, don't be surprised you don't get one. Just ask. Worst case, you're gonna get the no. What's the worst that can happen? And so I think Israel is sort of jumping on a lamb here and say, all right, whatever, let's try to sort of rally Trump around the idea of tackling Iran head on. I don't think it's a surprise to anyone. It's been going for over a decade, even 2 decades, that Iran has been developing a nuclear program, and it's a major source of concern for Israel, the region, and the world, and the United States, to be
Okay,
honest.
wait, you talked about an Israeli interest in tackling Iran head on. Was that a euphemism for US and Israel really should conduct airstrikes targeting Iran's nuclear facilities, especially since the air defenses of Iran are weak? Or tackling Iran head
Mm.
on means absolutely demand that, like Libya many years ago,
Yeah.
Iran gives up all the equipment and all the enriched uranium? Or which one?
I'm going to make it very simple for you. I think there's really no other way. We have to lead a preemptive, limited military action against Iran's military facilities and in Iran's nuclear facilities, rather. Iran's nuclear program is the number one threat, not just on Israel, not just on the Middle East, but the peace of the world. Because once you go down that slope, slippery slope, you never know what's going to happen. Iran is going to have this sort of oversized or outside influence and sphere of influence, and basically will trigger a whole nuclear arms race in the Middle East. We don't have to go all these. I'm just saying that the United States knows, and I feel the Trump administration is doing what he has to do, basically offering the Iranian a fig leaf and reaching out his hand, saying, "Look, I'm offering you the good way. You can choose the good way or the bad way," and sort of providing himself with an alibi, if you will. Okay, we're doing this negotiation now. You better come negotiate. You better come to the table. The Iranians, Arakchi, the foreign minister, the supreme leader, Khamenei, they said no negotiating with bullies. Unbelievable. And look, what do you know? Now they're negotiating in Oman and in Rome. And I've grown disillusioned about the Iranians. They're cheating their way to get what they want. And
Mm.
sort of they are, in my opinion, trying to smooth talk and sweet talk the Trump administration into getting exactly what they want. In
Which
the end,
must make you feel even better that Netanyahu had such a good conversation with Trump on Tuesday.
I hope so. I hope so, because I think it's clear to the Israelis that the Iranians are trying to cheat their way and get exactly what they want. And Trump knows that. He's no fool. He knows the Iranians are trying to sort of sugarcoat and offering him. Just today, it was revealed that Arakchi offered the Americans to build 19 nuclear power plants in Iran. It's good business, right? That's just their way of trying to win hearts and minds in the White House. I don't think this game is going to work. We can all see through it. Iran is threatening to destroy Israel overtly. The Supreme Leader said it many times. The IRGC commander said it many times. It is developing nuclear weapons in order to take over the Middle East and pose a direct threat on Washington, on the United States. I don't think anyone can tolerate that. And to be honest, it's okay to negotiate. At some point, put a red line, say, all right, we get it. They have no intention to get to a deal. And I'm perfectly fine with getting to that result and take military action. I'm
I hear
also
you.
perfectly fine with getting a good deal, but I don't think the Iranians are interested.
Or this is not just your position as an individual. Israel's Defense and Security Forum, the Bitronistim, is it fair to say, also considers the talks to be a fig leaf, as you put it, and frankly endorse the idea of limited targeted military strikes to set back Iran's nuclear program. That's your organization's stand?
Yes, in case that the talks fail, and I think there is no reason to believe why they succeed. And look, we're now rushing for war. You can say we're hawkish. I think we're simply clear-eyed. We're simply clear-eyed about what's going on here. Iran is trying to destroy Israel, and to that end, develop a nuclear bomb. And I think we can all see what's going on here in the sense that we know that the Iranians will not agree to a bad deal for them. I think that Israel would be wise to sort of set a framework. A good deal for us would be such and such. For example, no expiration dates. Trump heavily criticized Obama's 2015 nuclear deal, the first one. He knows he knows darn well that the expiration date on a nuclear deal is not a smart thing. They have to have much harder inspection mechanisms and get rid of all the enriched uranium, all the nuclear material, not just storing it in the basement or all sorts of like workarounds that they found in the original JCPOA, then 2015 nuclear deal. I I think that this move, to be honest with you, would not open war in the Middle East. It would end the war. This is a mechanism to end the war in the Middle East by removing a clear and present danger off the heads of Israel and the Arab countries in the region. That's the Iranian shadow that's hovering up above their heads and basically preventing normalization and peace between Israel and the Arab world. That's the key to reach stability in the Middle East rather than open a new war.
All right, that's a call for, yes, a military strike against Iran's nuclear program. I do want to get your opinion about what's going on in Syria.
Hmm.
Iran's big friend, President Assad, fell. There's some chaos in Syria. Sure, there's a new government in Damascus run by former terrorists, Al Qaeda affiliated, and there are factions all over Syria. So your country, Israel, moved troops in the Golan Heights area into Syrian territory, kind of on the way to the capital, Damascus.
Right.
What's the concern, and how does this involve worry about Turkey?
Look, it's a major source of concern, and I think Israel did wisely in acted wisely in taking over this buffer zone. I'm reminding you, in 1974, there was a sort of an armistice agreement with the old Assad regime, sort of a buffer zone between Syria and Israel. It's not Syrian territory per se. Syrian Golan is a crucial strategic elevated piece of land that can prevent an attack on Israel. Post October 7, we all want that. Look, I think HTS, Al Jolani, you know what? They deserve some credit for they did in 11 days what others failed to do for 11 years. We call them the rebels. We can now call them those who rebelled, past tense, and now they're in charge. And that's really the difference, I guess, between ideal and real. Yeah, ideally we'll have a stable sort of dictatorship or even a stable democracy in Syria. Who knows? But we end up in a
What's the
point where
problem with Turkey, though? A member of NATO, guarding its own border area, concerned about the Kurds always. Israel, Turkey, why are you so worried about that?
that's a real head scratcher for Israel. What to do with Turkey? Because Turkey is a NATO member. It's not as radical as Iran, and still rhetoric coming out of Erdogan, the president there, is extremely unnerving for Israel, calling Netanyahu Hitler and sort of invading to invade Gaza and all such things. The bottom line is that the Iranian presence in Syria was suddenly sort of replaced by a sort of a Turkish presence and a Turkish sphere of influence. They armed HTS, they helped them topple Assad. And Israel's main dilemma right now, what to do with Turkey. You can't simply attack Turkish forces in the manner that you attacked Iranian forces. So you kind of taking a big gamble here, trying to sort of ease the influence of Hamas, PIJ, and the remainders of the Assad army. And I think Israel will have quite a challenging time now. It's very interesting what's going on in Syria, especially with the Druze community, where Israel is offering some sort of a pathway to cooperation with them, with the Kurds. Very interesting what's going on there.
Very, very interesting, as you say, but also a bit of a head scratcher. Hey, Or Yissachar, I hope you'll come onto the podcast again because all of these stories keep developing, and it's great to have your input. You are the vice president and research director at Habichonistim, which kind of means the Security-ists, but the name in English is Israel's
That's
Defense
right.
and Security Forum. Or Yissachar, I thank you very much for joining us on the Mossad Files.
Happy to be here. Thank you.